Hi, humans. Welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching Podcast. I am Stella. We are recording in the evening. I had a busy morning, so I didn't have an opportunity to do it. It's hot. It's 103 right now, which is very silly. But I was thinking about this idea of ultimatums and boundaries, as I often do. But I wanted to make the kind of distinction between making a request, right, to change behavior or whatever, giving an ultimatum, and then how to set a boundary, especially as I continue to see a lot of things, this no contact parent situation. I get so many things in my feed these days about people trying to set boundaries, but they don't really know what they're doing. And so they end up, doing this ultimatum thing, or they request behavior, right? So the distinction is a little bit nuanced. And so a lot of times people will make a request to change behavior. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about an early episode of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson is sitting either in a car or at a table with Lisa Simpson, and he's holding his finger up next to her skin, like right up against her, going, "I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you." And if you grew up with siblings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's when we request, like, stop doing that, that's a request. Or when we say, I want you to stop doing whatever it is, as it relates to adult children and setting limits with parents and their interactions. A lot of times we make a request that they do whatever or don't do whatever. A lot of times it's, please don't give my child sugar, right? Or please don't give them a screen, or please don't, do whatever. They don't like that, right? And a lot of times parents of adult children will be like, "I'm not doing anything wrong." They try to justify their behavior. Um, when it comes to our children, we request that they do certain things, right? Um, and a lot of times there is no consequence to that request not being met. Last time we talked about, setting expectations or managing our own expectations, really thinking about what we would like to happen, and then often either being disappointed or frustrated or, having feelings about our requests not being met or our expectations not being met. The next piece would be setting an ultimatum or giving an ultimatum. And usually, a way to distinguish an ultimatum is, if this behavior doesn't change, then I will do blah, blah, blah thing, right? And a lot of times I've heard it tons in couples therapy where a partner will say, "If you don't do this, then I will do this thing," whatever it is. Or a lot of times there's a tally in our heads of what we expect from the other person. And, then we'll just stop doing whatever it is. Let's say laundry, for example. I've made requests for you to support with the laundry or do the laundry or whatever. And so a lot of times people will go on strike and they'll just stop doing it. Which, that's one way to get things done or not get things done. But the idea of an ultimatum is interesting because a lot of times we will set the expectation, and then when it doesn't happen for whatever reason, we don't follow up on the then part. We don't do whatever we said we were going to do if the behavior isn't changed or the request isn't met. And a lot of times we'll go on and on for a long time in certain relationships and just build resentment, just continue to get frustrated without actually following through on the then part of an ultimatum. And, it's interesting because it's usually stopping a behavior that continues to happen. For example, social media, right? A lot of people have very strong feelings when it comes to their partners engaging in social media and what happens on their social media page. We don't have a lot of control over what people like or what people look at or, how they engage in it. And often we will get frustrated, right? And so what I have seen is that partners who are doing the engaging in social media, they'll just be like, fine, I'll just delete it. Which, okay, that is one way of doing it. Um, there's usually a very exaggerated response to the request. And the frustrating part is that that's not the goal often, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a feeling or wanting to have a certain level of control or a certain expectation of what the outcome is. And it's difficult when, again, we don't have any control over what other people choose to do with their thumbs and social media. The boundary is different. And as I've discussed boundaries ad nauseum at different points in this podcast journey, a boundary is acknowledging your resources, right? Time, money, space, sex, and space, and recognizing how you manage that, right? It's our responsibility to manage our resources. And then also recognizing how we want to utilize our resources when it comes to other people. And so the boundary piece is going to be, what is the resource that is being depleted, and how am I going to be a steward of that while engaging with other people? What am I going to do to be able to manage my resources in a positive and productive way, right? Often it will start with a request specific to time, right? At 5 o'clock, I'm going to clock out. I'm going to ask that people don't send me emails, or I'm going to ask that people don't, call me after business hours, right? A lot of us don't work a 9 to 5. A lot of us clock in and clock out at a certain point, but often we continue to use our resources of time and thought and energy in engaging in work things far beyond what our hourly, commitment is. And so we can make the request, but a lot of times people won't respect it, and they will continue to submit emails, make phone calls, send text messages, and it's our responsibility to not engage, right? That's the challenge, is that our follow through has to be pretty significant when it comes to after work hours. A lot of us have other commitments, right? We're taking our kids to practice, we're going to dinner, we're taking a class, we're doing a lot of other things. And when we are getting emails or phone calls or thinking about work, it's really difficult to stay present. And a lot of times people will say, oh, I went on vacation, I was able to not engage, or I turned off my phone, or I didn't take my laptop with me. And those are the things that we can actually manage. Those are the requests that we can, for ourselves, manage. And again, we don't have any control over other people's behavior, but a lot of times if we leave the environment, let's say work or the office, we get to choose how we continue to utilize our own resources, right? Of time, energy, and all of the things that we often do beyond what is expected of us. Now, if we work in a culture where it is expected that we continue to engage, so for example, my clients are very well aware that on the weekends or after business hours, usually 6 o'clock, I don't respond to text messages. And we set it up at the beginning, even in the informed consent, I let people know I do not do emergency therapy. That's just not what I do. And usually if you call me, you'll get the please call 911 if you are in an emergency, right? But my clients often also recognize that they can manage emergencies on their own. They've been doing it their whole lives. They know how to do that. If someone is dealing with something acute, I will direct them to resources to be able to manage that until we can get them scheduled and to come in, right? I will often say at the end of a session, what do you need moving forward? So do you want something in a week, 2 weeks, a month? Where do you feel like your needs are? At the beginning, when I'm first seeing someone, I set the expectation. I will see you once weekly for 4 weeks. We will set up, regular, consistent appointments. Rarely am I seeing someone in crisis dealing with suicidality. Occasionally it happens, but very rarely is someone in that crisis state where they need my support. If they're in crisis, they're going to need a higher level of care. So that's just how I do it. That's the expectation. And again, people know that I don't respond to text messages or phone calls after business hours or on the weekends. That is something I have set up at the beginning. I know my boundary is I don't respond, right? And they signed the informed consent that that is the expectation. When it comes to, personal friends or other people in my life, they have lots of support. If someone is in crisis, obviously I will answer. The last time I had a friend crisis was several years ago. Somebody called me. I happened to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We were able to get through the crisis together. It was great. But when it comes to our partners or people in our lives, and specifically, the people that we help to manage crises with, recognizing, is this crisis yours to manage, right? Recently, my brother was in a motorcycle accident. He's fine. And it's interesting because when I heard about the accident, I called to confirm that he was okay. I got confirmation that he is mobile and he's not in a lot of pain. He wasn't, admitted to the hospital. I'm not a doctor, so there was nothing for me to do at that point. I did go and spend some time with him. I helped, do some laundry and get him set up with like groceries and any meal planning that we needed to do to make sure that he was okay. But that was as far as it went. He doesn't need me in that way. And he's mobile, he can drive, he went to the gym every day that I was there. So he was okay. But really recognizing when someone calls with a crisis on a regular basis, you get to determine your resources of what you are comfortable sharing or doing, but you don't have to jump in all the time to manage other people's crises, especially if it's not yours to manage. So that's the boundary piece. If someone is doing it on a regular basis, you find that, and I've talked about it again in the boundary section of the book, and certainly I did boundaries podcast episodes specific to the boundary of time and money, space, thoughts, emotions, all of those things. But really recognizing if someone is coming to you with a crisis on a regular basis, now the crisis doesn't have to be life-threatening, right? Oftentimes, our partners, our kids, people will perceive something as a crisis, even though it's not. And usually it comes down to mental capacity or space. How much are you managing the other person and their crises, right? Things, again, that they perceive as crisis in terms of like, I can't find my keys. I can't find clean socks. I don't know where the mustard is, whatever. And if you have children, you recognize that they have a different perception of what is a crisis versus, regular, degular stuff. And so really recognizing like, how much am I managing this for them? What is my mental energy spent trying to, deal with all these things? When it comes to our parents or our kids or our partners, a lot of times we need to be aware of our own mental energy. We can make a request. If you want to know where your keys are on a regular basis, put them in the same place. Where did you leave them? A lot of times that's the first question when someone's like, I don't know where my keys are and I need to leave or whatever. Yeah, where did you put them last? Well, if I knew where I put them, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. All right, well, if you want to know where your keys are, it's helpful to put them in the same place every day. That's something. I do realize that like neurodivergence, ADHD, impulsivity, like structure and routine, those are challenges for people. But again, if you're mentally managing another adult, the opportunity to make the request of put your keys in the same place every day. Well, how do you do it? Well, I put my keys in the same place every day, right? Or these are things that I do to help me remember where my keys are. When it comes, I can't find clean socks. Okay, well, part of why I helped my brother do laundry is he's great at being an adult, really good at these things, that he couldn't physically, bend over, do all the stuff because of where the break was in his leg. So I was able to do that for him. But he's a grown up. He lives by himself. He's capable of doing his laundry. I was able to support in that moment. We did have a couple conversations on how he folds things. But again, it wasn't a crisis. He wasn't in a place where he had no socks, right? He was able to figure it out. It's interesting when we think of ultimatums when it comes to that mental capacity or mental energy of managing someone else's expectations, right? A lot of times I'm following this, I'm not even following them. It comes up in my feed. There's this woman who is sharing the messages between her and her mother-in-law. It's very interesting in that watching a drama car wreck kind of situation because they're put to music and it's really kind of funny. Um, it's interesting because the mother-in-law is often interjecting in a way that is unhelpful. And the woman who's sharing the messages has made requests on a regular basis, both of her partner and her mother-in-law, trying to set boundaries. Um, Again, she's sharing these messages online on TikTok. They're probably on Instagram as well, about the dynamic between these two humans. That's an interesting boundary crossing. In fact, there is one particular like video where the mother-in-law is like, I know that you've posted our messages online. She doesn't make a request not to, but she continues to send messages. So here we are. It's interesting because, again, someone who is interjecting into your life, making requests on your time, access to your child. At one point there was a message where she was in the driveway to pick up her son, who is a grown up, married to this woman, because he was sick. The son did not make any requests for this woman to show up. She just did. Right. So the request is, please don't come over. And that's not the daughter-in-laws to manage. It's actually the sons. But think about people who are in your life, again, requesting access to your time, to your resources, to your space. You can request that they don't. You can request that they only, call or show up at whatever time. You can also say, if you continue to do this, then I will, cut off contact, or I will just not answer your phone call, right? I will block you, right? The if then creates the opportunity for us to follow through. If something happens, then this is the natural consequence, right? I will get your message. I will respond to it when I feel it's appropriate to respond, if I feel it's appropriate to respond. But recognize that the ultimatum piece is, if this happens, then this happens, right? A lot of times people take a break from engaging in certain relationship dynamics because they feel drained, they feel frustrated, they feel resentful, they feel angry, right? And when they take that break, then they reassess the appropriateness of, do I continue this relationship? The boundary would be, I see that you're calling on a regular basis or sending me these messages. I feel really uncomfortable or frustrated by them. I'm recognizing that I need to take a step back. And so I may not respond. And, if you continue to make requests of my time, my energy, my child, whatever it is, I'm going to be more inclined to not respond rather than to put them online. Again, it's fascinating to watch, but also really interesting that this is how people deal with, parents, especially as adults. It will get to that place, I can imagine, when there is no contact. And our boundaries are the opportunity for us to recognize what is ours to manage and what we have the capacity to manage, right? Really identifying how I feel and what would I like to happen. How likely is it that I can control the other person? Probably unlikely. But how can I figure out and be a good steward of my resources and also continue to have the relationship? The boundary piece is where we get to decide, here's where I end, that's where you begin, and how much do I want to continue to engage in this relationship dynamic so that it benefits both of us in a mutually, kind of beneficial way? Or how do I manage myself, right? How do I manage my peace? How do I manage my feelings? That's where we get to recognize what the boundary is. The ultimatum is often communicated as, if you continue to do this, then I will do whatever it is that happens, right? Um, a request is just asking for changed behavior. It's making a request of, this is what I need from you, right? The other person always gets to determine what they're willing to do, again, to maintain the relationship. But it does require a lot more communication. And it also requires an expectation of like, I I am making a request because this is what I want from you. How do I manage it if you don't, right? What do I do for me? And am I betraying myself if I continue not to follow through with what I can change, right? You can say all day long, I'm going to take away the keys. I'm going to take away, the iPad. I'm going to take away the blah, 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 whatever it is, if you don't do the thing. But if you don't follow through, then the person knows it doesn't mean anything, right? And you will continue to be frustrated, overwhelmed, angry, whatever it is, as long as you don't do the follow through. The most important part in consistency with relationships is follow through. Is, okay, I'm going to, as frustrating and difficult as it can be, I'm going to follow through with taking away access to my resources, right? Access to my time, access to my space, access to my money, access to the intellectual like sharing that we do. If I feel like my boundaries aren't being respected and the requests that I've made fall on deaf ears, and even if I set up an ultimatum or, really kind of get challenged and dig my heels in, if I don't follow through, like nobody's going to pay attention to it. So at that point, that's where we get to that cutoff place where we, burn down the village, uh, or burn the bridge or whatever. But recognizing there is nuance, there is steps, there are things that need to be communicated, and you really need to get clear on how you're feeling in those dynamics. It's difficult. And again, if the goal is relationship, if the goal is continuing to have connection, then you're going to have to say the words. You're going to have to be really clear. And you're going to have to come from, this is how I feel, rather than keeping score, blaming, arguing, conflict, continuing to have the same conversation over and over and over, because that's exhausting and it's not effective, right? It's not the most effective use of your time or resources to have the conversation multiple times if it falls on deaf ears or nothing changes. The whole part of parenting is meeting your kid where they're at, right? Having appropriate expectations for who they are, and then also having that follow through, having that ability to say, okay, if you take the car again and you come back after your curfew, then I'm taking the keys, right? I'm taking the phone, I'm taking whatever it is. Kids do better with positive reinforcement, and they do better with communication of expectations, and they do better with an explanation, reasons why, right? Just because I said so doesn't really fly anymore, and certainly not in gentle parenting. Um, but when we're dealing with adult children, recognize your expectations, how you feel, and what you want from the relationship. If the goal is connection, which it often is, then meeting them where they're at and also listening to their expectations and requests. And then you get to choose, right? That's your behavior. But do not be surprised when people, cut off contact or limit contact or take pauses in the relationship if they feel as though their boundaries, hopefully that they've communicated, are not being respected. There's your nugget. It's late in the day. I'm exhausted. Although I do have a little bit more energy than I expected, considering it was a long day. I hope you're all doing well. I hope that you are working on communicating your expectations and managing your expectations, right? Really recognizing what is possible. I always encourage that you pay attention to how you feel before, during, and after when you have these interactions, and you're having quality relationships as well as quality peace. There's your nugget. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.